The dawn over the small town of Sunflower Creek, stretching along the wide valley, came slowly. The first pale streak of light had just appeared on the horizon, dispelling the night's coolness. The large three-story mansion on Maple Street 22, reminiscent of past grandeur, was bustling with police officers at this early hour. A faint glimmer of luxury faded away in the narrow cracks of its weathered plaster. The somewhat hard-of-hearing housekeeper, Mrs. Dorothy Bennett, found the body of her employer, Miss Eleanor Chesser, early that morning. After calling the police, Mrs. Bennett went into the living room and took out the little box where her employer kept the cash. She carefully counted her wages for August, then sat on a bench, waiting for the police. Captain William Cross of the police department was finishing his morning coffee when the phone rang from the precinct. A few minutes later, a black 8-cylinder Buick Roadmaster, as flawless as its owner, was speeding toward Maple Street. Eleanor Chesser's body lay at the foot of the third-floor balcony. Captain Cross approached carefully, making sure not to trample over any potential evidence, and pulled back the sheet. The young woman, once graceful and slender, now seemed endlessly fragile and defenseless. A look of quiet sorrow and detached focus settled on his face, something common to those who've seen too many people's worst days. The coroner hadn't arrived yet, so Cross took his time, inspecting every inch around the sheet-covered body. The shards of a wine glass caught his eye right away. William looked up. The bottle was still perched on the balcony railing. It didn't look like the glass had fallen from up there. More likely it was smashed down here. "Doyle?" he called, without taking his eyes off the shards. Francis Doyle, a young lieutenant with tousled hair and sleep-deprived eyes, approached, attempting to give his face an air of insightfulness. "What do you think, kid?" Cross asked, squinting slyly. "There's reason to believe she just overindulged in wine," Doyle replied with a serious expression. "Got a theory already, son?" Cross asked, narrowing his eyes with a sly grin. "I heard from the maid that Miss Chesser liked to spend her evenings with a glass of wine. There's an empty bottle on the balcony. No signs of a struggle, no bruises on the arms or body, so I'd say it could have been an accident. But I'll wait for the expert's report before making a final call." Doyle raised a finger meaningfully as he spoke, his face deadly serious. "There's no sign of a struggle, that's for sure," Cross thought to himself. Meanwhile, Dorothy's housekeeper revealed in tears that the landlady lived alone and rarely received guests. The neighbors weren't particularly sociable either. On one side lived Miss Evelyn Lambert, a young teacher who had recently moved from a neighboring town. On the other is the scandalous Mrs. Amalia Brooks, a 50-year-old widow known to the whole street for her complaints. Cross decided to visit Miss Lambert first. The old maple tree in front of her house stretched out its thick branches, casting a lacy shadow across the freshly painted white wooden steps. Miss Lambert's house was neat as a pin, and the lady herself greeted William with an easy smile. Evelyn was slender and strikingly beautiful. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with a lively gleam. Cross introduced himself. "Captain Cross, come on in. What can I do for you?" Her voice was soft but carried a quiet confidence. "I am interested in anything you can tell me about Miss Chesser, her circle, and anything unusual about last night." Evelyn explained that they'd only met recently. Eleanor was a lovely woman, gracious, really. She'd invited her over for a glass of wine a few evenings, but they weren't exactly close. Eleanor lived a quiet, almost reclusive life. She was divorced, didn't show much interest in men, and spent a lot of time reading. As Cross listened closely to Miss Lambert, he suddenly realized his attention was drifting. from her words to the woman herself. The easy way she carried herself, her voice, her tone, even the faint scent of her perfume, bit by bit they were drawing him in. "Did you notice anything out of the ordinary last night?" he asked, his eyes taking in the warm, tastefully decorated living room. Evelyn thought for a moment. "No, Captain, I was home all day and spent the evening reading, right up until midnight. But if I learn anything useful, I'll be sure to let you know. You can count on my help." "Thank you, Miss Lambert. If you don't mind, I may stop by again." "Of course, go ahead." "Miss Lambert," he lingered at the door, hiding his smile. "Aren't you afraid to live alone in a place like this?" "I am used to it, Captain," she said, glancing out the window. "Though I might start thinking about it now, especially if I see another police officer climbing over the fence." Cross looked out the window as well. Lieutenant Doyle, trying to cut through the yard, had snagged his pants on the picket fence and tumbled onto a pile of sawdust. Cross laughed, feeling the morning tension ease for the first time. The sight of the clumsy Doyle brushing sawdust off his pants drew loud laughter from Miss Lambert as well. "Doyle, you're a real miracle," Cross remarked as he left the house. Back at the crime scene, Cross noticed someone watching him through a gap in the fence of the neighboring house. He decisively walked toward it, circling around the mansion. The doors were locked, but near the fence, where that unknown peeping Tom had been, William spotted plenty of footprints in the damp soil. Among them, what caught his attention were dried tracks from expensive men's shoes and fresh prints from small women's galoshes. The men's shoe prints led along the fence, as if the person had climbed over it. From there, the tracks led to the living room window of Miss Cheshire's house, before disappearing on the tiled pathway. Someone had been watching the events inside Miss Cheshire's home through the window. The tracks were dry, likely made the previous evening. Cross inspected the house and began examining Miss Cheshire's papers. Finding nothing of interest, he noted that not all of the deceased's documents appeared to be at home. Some might be in a safe deposit box, which needed further investigation. The only item that caught his eye was an unfinished letter from Eleanor Cheshire to her Aunt Elizabeth, where she mentioned someone named Frederick. In the letter, Eleanor wrote that Frederick was asking for money again, but wouldn't be getting any this time. After jotting down notes in his notebook, Cross decided to visit Miss Cheshire's scandalous neighbor, Mrs. Brooks, one more time. On his way to the house, Cross noticed a red Packard parked by the fence of the neighboring home. Someone inside the car was watching what was happening in Miss Cheshire's house. As Cross approached, the driver of the red Packard suddenly took off, disappearing down the nearest alley. A conversation with law enforcement clearly wasn't part of his plans. Too many people interested in what's going on, but none of them willing to talk to the cops. That's a lot of attention for an accident, Cross thought as he headed toward Mrs. Brooks' house. The doors were locked, but someone was clearly inside. Cross circled around the house and found a back door. He knocked, but there was no response. The captain gave the door a firm shove with his shoulder and stepped into a hallway that seemed to stretch on forever. A dull bulb overhead flickered weakly. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the metallic click of a gun. Cross felt the cold barrel press against his back. "Don't move or I'll shoot," growled a coarse, smoke-roughened voice. Cross froze, every muscle in his body tensing. His hand instinctively moved toward his holster, but he stopped himself. The damp wooden walls, blistered with peeling paint, gave off the stale, sour smell of mildew. The only sound breaking the silence was the slow, steady drip of water falling from the ceiling.